Good evening and welcome to our fourth webinar, and this is going to be a panel discussion. So one of the challenges this COVID has posed is primarily on the supply side of the business. Not sure which suppliers are going to be surviving, which suppliers are still going to be there, how many of them have got the deep pockets of the guts to continue, and how well the supply chain is going to cope up or shape up post-COVID. So this one perspective is purely a short-term perspective we are looking at. But that is not the only side of the story. So there is another side of the story. If I am going to prepare my suppliers in the current context or what is urgent now, sometimes I may miss out on what is important as well, which is primarily how well my demand is going to vary. Will my demand go up or demand is going to come down? Or if I create a capacity now for the demand, expecting the demand to go up, how long I can hold on to it. There are multiple challenges which definitely our suppliers are facing. And add to that, we definitely have a kind of I would say very first time something is defined clearly in terms of MSME by the finance minister a couple of days back as well, which also adds to the hope of most of our suppliers for MSMEs to survive. So in this context, we thought it is better to get some champions from industry to talk about this. Instead of looking at a consultant's view, it is better to give a practitioner's view who is actually facing this challenge, facing this day in and day out. So that is the theme for this panel discussion. What kind of supply chain challenges we have consciously given us today and tomorrow. Today is purely the short-term part of it. Tomorrow is the long-term part of it. So the format I'll come to in a few minutes. But introduce the panelists. We have three terrific panelists we have. The first one is Mr. Sanjay Ranawade. Steers all manufacturing and sourcing and supply chain of Tanishq, the jewellery division of Titan. Trained by Professor Soji Shiba. He has worked earlier with Moser Bayer, Sterlite Optical Technology, Godrej Telecom and BDL. An engineering graduate with PG Diploma in Management. With 31 years of industrial experience, a rich experience, rich pedigree and degree, and we have Mr. Sanjay with us. Thanks, Sanjay, for being here. Welcome to the panel.
Thank you.
The second person we have is Mr. Suhas Baxi. Suhas Baxi has been a CEO for quite some years. He headed Dima Cranes, he headed Kone Cranes, and he has been in this leadership position. He was in Thermax earlier. And currently is independent director on the board of Praj Industries. And he has a rich experience in terms of looking at the business end to end. And now having keen interest in digital transformation of companies. He's an alumnus of VNIT Nagpur, and I am Ahmedabad and HBS leadership experience of 32 years in manufacturing and software. Thanks, Suhas, for being there. Welcome to the panel.
My pleasure.
The third person is from another industry. So we have one from jewellery, that is we got one with a rich project experience, and the third person is from automobile, the mother of all industries. So we have Mr. Veeraraghavan, an alumnus of IIT Madras and IIM Calcutta, with 28 plus years of industrial experience across companies like Ford, Maruti in purchasing and supply chain. He heads the strategic sourcing group of Mahindra. So who else can be better than these three people to talk about this? So welcome all three of you to this. Thanks, Veeraraghavan, for being there. Welcome to the panel. Okay.
Yes, thanks, Hari. My pleasure to join this group.
Yeah. And the format is like this. See, this is the challenge in a web-based panel discussion is going to be unlike a face-to-face panel discussion. Right, where as a panelist or as a moderator, I throw the question left, right, and center to anybody whom I should give it. But here in this format, a slight change in the format. We'll start with a brief introduction by three of them in the context of what we are discussing. So the context has broadly three perspectives. One is a short-term perspective, immediate post-COVID and the COVID challenges. Second is a long-term perspective, the challenges which are going to be facing, which will get accentuated or aggravated or facilitated by the current challenges. And there are certain external factors, the pestle challenges, which also are posing a new threat and opportunity. So the format is going to be like this. Each of the panelists will have about 2 to 3 minutes to give a initial summary of what they are looking at. Then we have about 6 questions, 2 each for the 3 themes of short-term, long-term and external factors. For each of the question, each panelist is going to give their perspective from their industry context and taking about a couple of minutes on each of this. Then we will have a summary and then we'll open up the whole forum for questions from the other members who are attending this. As for other members who are attending this, please keep your audio muted. Okay, this is going to be a non-presentation kind of a discussion. So the 3 panelists, you can position themselves on your screen and see them also. That becomes easier for you to follow this. Any questions you have, keep shooting it in the chat box. We'll consolidate the questions and it can be a specific question to a specific panelist also. It can be to anybody also. I hope this is fine. Keep your things muted, audio muted. Your video can be on, absolutely fine. Okay, keep posting your questions in the chat box. Okay. So here we go. So now I think I'll open up the presentation for all. Wait. So the theme is like this. So when we are looking at the supply chain challenges, as I said, there are 3 kinds of challenges. We are looking at short-term, long-term, and the external factors which pose the challenge. So I am opening up the discussion for the panelists to give their perspective. We'll start with Suhas. Maybe you can open up on this. Your initial thoughts.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. And am I audible? Just confirmation from Hari.
Yes, you are. You are.
So good afternoon once again. It's an absolute pleasure to be part of this discussion. And my views here would be primarily from a point of view of capital equipment or capital creation industry. The main triggers or main drivers for capital creation and industrial capital creation so far has been private investment in capacity building and government investment in capacity building. Over the last few years, we've seen that the capacity utilization challenge in India had kind of slowed down the extent of private investment which happened in capital investment sector. Most of the growth that we saw in the Indian market was driven by what I would call as a result of government's investment in infrastructure creation. Whether it is railways, whether it is power, whether it is road building, whether it is ports, you saw investment by the government and then you saw a trickle effect of this investment essentially leading to capital equipment companies investing in their own growth or experiencing growth. So I would look at the current situation from a point of view of this reality and another reality that the Indian industry faced over the last few years. And that was of the banking and the NBFC related issues that one faced. For last 4 or 5 years, one has seen that a large number of companies in sectors such as steel faced capital creation issue on account of the fact that they were either sick or they were at a receiving end of not being in a position to raise capital. So there was a certain level of slowdown already in the capital creation sector, and almost everything was dependent on government's push to infrastructure creation. This is pre-January or February 2020. Post-February 2020, government's ability to invest in infrastructure creation is going to be tested. In my opinion, one would see kind of decline in demand for capital creation in different sectors. So companies which are in capital equipment sector, depending upon what they are servicing, are expected to see a longish period of slow demand and definitely a no growth situation. Surviving this in the context of what I said just now is going to be a challenge for OEMs and project companies in this business. Supply chain of these companies, unlike the supply chain for automotive sector, is essentially driven by the labor-intensive part of the job. So most of the companies outsource or go to their supply chain partners wherever the value chain is labor-intensive. The impact of slowdown in capital creation, the impact or unwillingness of the capital equipment sector to make big investments would have a prolonged impact on supply chain of this industry. And whether it is with respect to the extent of business that they see, whether it is with respect to the change in business models that they would experience, some of it will have to be seen over a period of time. But I do expect a sluggish period over the next few years at least. That would be my opening remark.
Thanks. Thank you, Suhas. Yeah, capital creation is under stress. I understand that, and which is crucial for the suppliers as well. Now we'll move on to the variety, primarily into Tanishq now. We'll get the opening remarks from Mr. Sanjay Ranawade. Sanjay, open.
Yes. So, good evening all. Thanks.
Take 3 minutes on this. Yeah.
Thanks all participants for joining on this call. See, just to give you a little background about Tanishq. Tanishq, we have 300 plus stores across the country, and then it is all well supported by manufacturing and sourcing base across the country. So like during this period, like this gets divided into during this crisis period, and we were more into this how to take care of all our partners, the people working with us and their safety. In fact, some section of people there was like who work with us 100% to take care of their financial needs also company has looked into. And during this period, basically we're in almost in a certain way in touch with all our manufacturing team, our sourcing team, all our partners working across the country to ensure that what is the way the situation, how shall we go about. In fact, the time have been spent to create that required SOPs so that when we start with all following all the practices of social distancing, mask, sanitization, so that nothing goes wrong. So this is on one side. The other side, surely we as a team to spend this time to really sharpen the saw, look into some of the strategic priorities and spend time on that. That is what we have done. Also, we discussed with all our partners. So what we are currently seeing, surely in a short term, the demand once again will be on a low side. And we being into precious and supply chain, so we'll have to manage this period, seeing that how the engagement can be kept with all our partners, all our artisans working at different places, is becomes one of our challenge. And so that is on one side, so that like the load or the production may be low, but how to keep these people engaged. So is it to do with some new product innovation, or what are the other ways of looking into? The other aspect what we are saying is, see, this phase may get over, and also we know some of the, we also belong to an industry where some work happens scattered across, we need to get it done from our dedicated strategic partner. And the possibility of the artisan at bottom of the pyramid, whether is going to be any migration or anything of that sort, so that we should not get into this problem. Today demand is not there, but the people are there. But tomorrow when demand comes, are we getting into this problem? And I talk about this both for our jewelry as well as diamond cutting and polishing industry. Because together, this is the industry which contribute to 7 to 8% of the GDP. The size of the industry is surely much bigger. 46 to 50 lakh or close to 5 million people work into this industry. And so it is important in that context how this goes about. While we are sure, because this wedding jewelry is once again that essential part of our wedding and part of our Indian culture and heritage. And so we surely see that this demand will come back. It may come back maybe in the different form, like demand for products may change, the manufacturing base may change. So on the other side, we are also saying this is also giving us opportunity to relook back. What is the way this manufacturing happening? Tanishq in a certain way is already doing certain steps on the ground to bring transformation into this manufacturing industry. and their journey is on, and we are also seeing further what is the way we can go about this further and really provide whatever this Indian consumer is looking for is what I think we will continue with. So this is what I think I can give the initial perspective, and with this back to Hariharan. Yeah,
it's a very, very intensive, labor-intensive kind of a supply chain. The challenges are definitely different, especially the kind of migrant laborers and other things what you have. Okay, now we'll go to the third and the mother of all industries in that sense, automobile industry. Let us open up to Mr. Veeraraghavan for his opening remarks. Sir, Mr. Veeraraghavan, your opening remarks.
Thank you, Hari. Can everyone hear me clearly?
Yes, we could.
Okay. So I think as far as the automotive industry goes, as Mr. Baxi said, the industry, he was referring to his industry, but even the auto industry was in a slowdown for almost a year, or maybe even 18 months prior to this COVID situation hitting us. Multiple reasons. Of course, the overall slowing down of the economy was the biggest reason, but then there were also other reasons why the auto industry was down. And this COVID crisis has really hit us very hard. I think it first hit us in the supply chain, as we saw. Automotive industry has a very, very complex supply chain going into multiple tiers, and we have parts coming in from China, and then sometimes we saw parts going from Malaysia to China and then coming to India, and then parts going from Germany to Malaysia to China and coming to India, and so on. And all of that was massively disrupted in the wake of this COVID crisis. Of course, that was for about 6 weeks before India itself got into the shutdown, and now we are shutting down. So we will be causing crises somewhere else in the world economy, as we are not able to supply export parts from India to other countries. I think going on from here, the two biggest challenges I see for the auto industry, one is the demand. What will happen to the demand going forward, particularly as the customer confidence is shaken quite a lot. And in that we see some very different trends. In the automotive side, we do see a significant drop in demand because customer sentiment is down, and automobiles being a discretionary purchase, we do expect to see that it will take time for all that demand to revive. Whereas in some of the other sectors, like the farm division, for example, it may actually work the other way. And particularly as we see the return of the migrant labor, and then the shortages that will cause in the farm industry, we actually see some maybe even higher than expected demand on farm equipment and so on. So it's a sort of a mixed bag, but clearly we don't know fully as yet what will happen, but these are some of the challenges we see. I think as far as the other key challenge we see is just the disruption of the supply chain. How do we get back to a situation where we are able to work safely, work with social distancing in our factories, get the labor back into the factories, which is going to be a big challenge I see. And at the same time, how do we ensure that there is sufficient liquidity in the system to ensure that we are able to run our operations? So these are some of the key challenges that I see coming out of this situation.
Yeah, that's interesting. In fact, if the shift is going to move towards agriculture, yes, you are right. It can be a mixed bag because we are in both the sides, automotive and also in the farm equipment. And the movement in trucks and buses also can be helped in that context. Now let us go to some specific questions. As I said, we have divided the question into 3 parts. So let me start with the first part of the question. There are 2 questions in each of the phase we have. The first is a short-term challenge. In the short-term challenge, there are issues faced by the vendors. Maybe they require support, and it may be financial support, it can be intellectual support, it can be moral support, whatever be the support they require. And each of your 3 industries have different kind of what you call challenges in that context. So what is your outlook on this? Maybe this time we'll start with Veeraraghavan and then go in the reverse order. Yes, Veera.
Yeah, so I see basically 3 types of challenges on the supply chain. So the first one is, how do you restart in a safe manner? And I think how do you ensure, for example, that you are able to maintain all the social distancing that is required? Because what you absolutely don't want is to restart a factory and then find out that there has been an infection in your factory, because that can cause even more disruptions, and clearly, not good for the health of the employees concerned. So that's a very key concern in my view. You have to ensure that you start off in a safe manner. Also, I think as you go through this, you have to relook all the principles, philosophies that we had earlier, right? And earlier, the focus was on efficiency. How do I make best use of the equipment available? How do I make best use of the land available? So we were trying to minimize movement of parts, minimize movement of labor. And now suddenly we are in a situation where you're saying, no, the next person must be at least 2 meters away, right? And clearly, it's a completely different philosophy than what we had earlier. And what that means is then all your operations have to be rethought. Everything has to be looked at separately, and that has its own set of challenges. How do you define the cycle time? How do you define the sequence of operations to be done at a station? And most importantly, how do you ensure the quality of the product is not compromised as you make all these changes? So that I see is the biggest challenge for the industry. The second challenge, of course, is the liquidity crisis that everyone will be facing, and I think we'll discuss that a little more in detail in the next question. But just to restate the obvious, I should say it is a big challenge, and there is no question that liquidity is going to be a key determinant for several suppliers going into the future. Those who are able to manage this will succeed, and I'm hoping that there will be no one who will not be able to manage it, but clearly there are some risks that we see in this process. The third one is the return of the labor. I think the labor return is, to me, even bigger challenge, because today all the movement is going the other way. They're all going away from their workplaces to their hometowns or villages. What is the confidence they will have to come back to their workplaces is going to be a big challenge. I'm not quite sure how exactly that's going to play out, particularly if you think that this crisis may go on for more than a year. What is the confidence anyone will have to come back? So I see that as a big challenge, and I think a lot of industries will have to look at how do I manage with far less people than what we had earlier.
Okay. Sanjay, in fact, the similar challenge what you have in your industry should be more pronounced because of the kind of labor intensity being extremely high. Yeah. And what kind of issues your vendors face? Because your vendors absolutely are small carigars and small manufacturers. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And how do you manage?
I will just put this into two phases. One is that during this lockdown period is what we have done. And then the other one is that post-lockdown, how we go about. So the lockdown period, at least we saw that we are connected almost end-to-end on our customer side, so-called internal customer up to the boutique level, and on the other side with all partners. And we have ensured during this period we become clear to each other, take care of the people. Also transmit that positivity during this period to see that, so we heard all of them, we gave that confidence to the people. And now, and in the short term what we have done, we also looked into all our partners who are like 100% only working for us, to certain people working 20% for us. So we have that clarity. And so based on that, taking care of them so that take care of financial need of the people if it is there, and supporting from the company side. So we have gone ahead and taken that steps. We are also keeping certain funds aside. If there is any need other partners have, in a certain way we can support this so that they don't have any financial trouble. On the other side, what our team has done, they kept our so-called people at bottom of the pyramid, artisans, keeping them engaged and keep giving that whole positivity to take care of them is what have been ensured, I will say, during this period. And short term now with this, another thing happened at all our manufacturing location. People spend time very proactively when we open up, how this whole activity to start, because we are also there, the space becomes a constraint and you find people working so closer to each other. So how to have this social distancing, follow this entire, and most of the teams across the country, they made their visual SOPs, and the whole aspect has been done in a very nice way. also during this period, like what I said, we are having a meeting with all our key partners and understanding and then becoming clear what is the way we should go about in future and giving that confidence to these people. So it is coming very clearly next 2-3 months, we basically spend on this entire new product innovation, developing this product, keep people engaged, take care of them so that we just move on. Let this storm to pass. That's what I think we have done in this short period.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Yes,
Thank you.
Suhas.
Yeah.
No, we are not able to hear Suhas. Unmute your video, audio. Unmute. Yeah.
Super, thanks. So I would raise two topics here. One is with respect to operations of project sites. Most of the capital equipment companies and capital project companies have almost 50% of their activity happening at customer premises, where installation, commissioning, maintenance type of work happens. So at any point in time, most companies have hundreds or thousands of people engaged at customer sites. One of the issues that we have started facing, and we faced severely during the COVID times, and that will continue over the next few months, is how to take care of these traveling masses. It could be your own employees, it could be your contractors' employees, it could be people who are experts. How do you make sure that a safe and sound travel logistics, lodging, boarding is found for these people for the purpose of getting back into what I would call as any level of normalcy? For example, companies like Larsen & Toubro have hundreds of thousands of people at customer site when COVID-19 actually struck. Companies smaller than that had lesser number of people, but they had to solve exactly the same problem. This is problem for OEMs and this is problem for vendors of the OEMs, both. So I would list this as one of the major problems that one has to solve. The second issue that I would raise is an issue which is related to status of the order book of project companies. What one has clearly started seeing is customers have started delaying project execution. Customers have started cancelling a lot of orders which were given for supply. And this has a significant impact on supply chain of the OEM companies. I mean, let's take example of a boiler manufacturer or a turbine manufacturer. If a project which has an 18-month delivery period is 6 months into manufacturing and the customer ends up cancelling the order, you have invested inventory, you've got half-built parts, you've got suppliers who are ready to supply, and you suddenly are facing cancellation of the order. How do you handle this situation is going to be another significant challenge for capital equipment companies. And both of these situations essentially impact the supply chain. It's not about what is the government doing, but it's about a situation which is purely driven by capital creation methodology, which is resulting in a situation which may be beyond normal definition of any type of aid that any government is right now making available. And I think these are the 2 points which I do believe would be common across supply chains for capital equipment companies.
See, sir, just hold on here, because continuing from the same perspective, the funding of the suppliers is now with the kind of suggestions or modifications the government has brought in 3 days back. So will it have an impact? Because it is going to be ultimately somebody has to go to the bank and get that loan. So how much the bank is going to give the loan for them also becomes a challenge. So my suppliers, with the redefinition of MSME, can there be a kind of significant change in the way things are happening at the funding side of it? Since you talked about the funding for suppliers is going to be a challenge, not only for the capital goods, even for the jewelers and also for the automobile suppliers. This is my next question.
The question for you is, what will the banks fund? Will the banks fund non-moving inventory, or will the banks fund working capital new orders for them? The resultant of the current situation may result in a large amount of non-moving inventory, which may not move for, given the fact that we're talking lean and everything else, you may have blocks and blocks in your company which are in red zone and not moving for months together or at times years together because customers are keeping orders in hibernation. Who's going to fund that is going to be a very, very deep question, and I don't think a policy initiative at this stage is able to answer it. This will require a very high degree of collaboration, right from the customer end to the OEM end, to the project companies end, to the supplier end. And, finding answers to most of these over a period of time will be very, very tough.
Veeraraghavan, what is your take on that one? Because it is primarily focusing on the funding part.
Yeah, and I think the government initiative that they announced a couple of days back is well thought out. They're primarily focused on the liquidity aspect, which is, I think, the biggest issue right now. And they are trying to address that. So there are two things in there. One is, of course, the guarantees that are being provided and the support being, the encouragement being given to the banks to lend. But honestly, banks have sort of struggled in the past to really increase lending. And so in that perspective, if you look at what they've done with NBFCs, which is to sort of give them a little more freedom, I think that's really more helpful. So even for us, for example, Mahindra Finance, right? So we are now talking to them to say, can you help to fund our suppliers? And that's a discussion that's going on. And previously, that may have been a challenge because they had their own issues a couple of weeks back. But given this latest initiative by the government, I think that makes it easier. So I think from that perspective, the liquidity aspect is definitely being addressed, and I think that it will make a big difference. There's no doubt about it. Long term, the demand stimulation also has to happen. So right now, I think that those measures are not yet clear or have not yet been announced at this point of time. So for now, liquidity is the important criteria, no doubt about it, and that's rightly being addressed. But the government also has to look at how they will address demand stimulation going forward.
But if you look at carefully, we are in most of the supply chain financing which happens from banks, they are all focusing more on the dealer side rather than the supplier side.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. Can you just repeat that?
Most of the supply chain financing, what the banks talk about, is primarily moving towards the dealer side. So long.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yes, like I said, we are in talks with Mahindra Finance, for example, which is an NBFC, and we are talking to them to say, can you assist? And what they've indicated now is these latest announcements that have made it easier for them to address that funding of suppliers as well. So from that perspective, I do view it as a very positive development.
Okay. Sanjay, how about your context on this one? In terms of the funding of the suppliers, who actually liquidity is a critical problem for them as well. Sanjay?
Yes.
Yeah.
See, I just look this issue from a two perspective. One is that looking whatever this announcement have been done, now we need to become clear about this, what way this can help our partners and for getting this whatever working capital support or in terms of capital investment, what they want to do. Surely I somewhere see most of our partners, they are into this MSME category, and there may be availability of funds at a lower rate of interest. That looks one possibility. I am sure it will be helpful. And what we are also thinking from our side, because we being a type of supply chain where the contribution of the precious material is very high compared to the cost of manufacturing. So we are also very actively thinking. Already our model has got various things, like we do a job work wherein we supply material, we do a out work where it goes as per our design, and also we have outright. So we are also very actively thinking about whether some of our outright supplier can be supported with that raw material support, so that they do not have to invest into that, and that support goes from our side is what we are actively thinking about, and bring that change so that they do not have that financial burden other than their whatever the value addition what they are doing.
Okay. But all these things are going to work provided we get our customers back. So now going to the long term, if you look at it, if you look at the demand side of the businesses, Sanjay, if you look at the demand side of the businesses, the related impact of the demand side is going to be significant in my supply chain, because can I raise my capacity based on expected demand, or can I wait and create a capacity? Yeah. The challenge of capacity creation expecting a demand is going to be telling in the long run. Yeah, please.
Yeah, that is going to be a challenge. That is what we need to see. Right now, we are in the month of May, and generally for us, this Diwali becomes one important season. And we see that we have 2-3 months away. क्या हो गया?
We already lost our Akshay Tritiya.
So you can hear me properly?
Yeah. We already
lost Akshay Tritiya. Just it was on 26th of April, and the next big event what we see is Diwali. And so we are seeing what we see going by the current. See, already I can say out of our all showroom, 20-22% showrooms are open as of now. And we also think that this all will open up. But also customer need to get that confidence that they can come to the showrooms and buy this jewelry. All precautions we are taking at the showroom also. But what we see going by the demand, going by the stock or inventory, surely it is going to be next 2 to 3 months will be a lean period in terms of manufacturing. That is becoming visible. And so how to take care of this team, keep them engaged while use this period to really develop something exceptional product, or I can say product innovation is what comes to our mind at this point of time. Because we can't do anything else other than that to keep these people engaged and same is moving. I think that's a thought we are having, and surely what we think like for a wedding season. Now, let us say most of these marriages will get deferred, but still in the country, 1 crore plus marriages happen. It is not that the marriages will be completely, they will get reduced to 50%. That is not going to happen. So we also feel demand is going to be there. It will come. It may be in the, whatever demand was there in May and June may happen in December, January. That is a possibility in our case. And so I think we need to get ready for that event. Yes.
Okay. But Veeraraghavan, in automobile industry, this change is going to be more structural rather than simplistic change in demand because of season, right? So the demand of the business and the related impact on supply chain is going to be more telling for an industry like yours.
Yeah, I briefly talked about this in my opening address as well. For sure, demand patterns are going to be changing. There's no question about it. Like I said, within the automobile sector itself, I think there are different segments will have different impacts. I talked about the farm division where we may actually see an increase if the availability of labor goes down. On the automobile side, it's actually interesting. When China reopened after their shutdown in March and April, what companies actually saw was a slight increase in demand. And the reason for that was primarily because people were not interested in traveling by public transportation, and they were not interested in hiring, Olas and Ubers, or Didi is in China. Basically, no one was interested in making use of taxis and so on. So they preferred to actually have their own personal transportation. So that was an interesting phenomenon, but I anticipate that's only short term. And maybe, it works in China because there is more disposable income there. In India, I think it's a challenge. And I think to my perspective, demand is going to be significantly down for the rest of this year and maybe even going into next year as well. So we will need to manage with a significantly lower demand. And if I just look at across industries, what sort of strikes me is activities or consumption of goods or services that require you to be in a crowded place is going to be a challenge. So I can see, theaters, malls, amusement parks. I can see all of them really having challenges because people are going to be really concerned about going and, being in a big crowd, exposing yourself to various risks. Even going to a temple or a mosque probably falls into that category as well. And on the other hand, activities that involve, say, online purchasing, for example, that's going to go up hugely because, right now, even vegetables and grocery are now starting to order online because of the current shutdown. And that's something that's going to continue. So clearly, I think looking across all industries, demand patterns are going to change significantly over time. There's no question about it. They're probably changing even earlier, but this has just accelerated the whole thing.
Suhas, what's your take on that?
So before I straight away answer to that, I just want to make a point with respect to what Veeraraghavan said earlier with respect to the financing opportunities and the solution. I have a little different take, especially with respect to project companies there. What happens in companies which do not make assembly line products or companies which do not make standard products is you're always building a custom built solution, and when project or order gets cancelled, the entire supply chain ends up holding unfinished products which are not useful to anybody. I've always seen that being one of the messiest financings ever to be made, and I do believe that more such situations will come. But I do not want to take this point further. I want to come to the long-term question that you asked. I see two types of changes happening in the long term. One, capital equipment companies and project companies may move faster to the model of selling usage and managing fleets, selling services rather than trying to sell their products and projects. This has been a move going on for a very long time, and almost everybody globally wants to move towards capturing value across the life cycle of what they supply. I think the acceleration towards this phenomenon will be faster, and more companies, which are equipment companies right now, may get into services business going forward. That's one of the things which I do see as a long-term trend. I think that leads to interesting possibilities in terms of value creation across the value chain. The second possibility that I see, which is actually on the top of such a services opportunity, is type of digitalization efforts that companies will undertake. I think so far digitalization has been driven in industrial space on the back of needs such as remote monitoring, remote diagnostics, and stuff like that. The extent of digitalization which has happened in consumer space has actually been much bigger than what has happened in industrial space. I do believe that the impact of COVID across the world would make people move towards business models, manufacturing models, and organization models which will be digitalization heavy. This will lead once again to more possibilities for companies in India, not only for their own businesses but for providing services for companies in India as well as outside of India. So I look at type of changes which may happen very positively, and I do believe that we should quickly start looking at type of business models that one can create, not only within larger companies but within smaller companies for the purpose of addressing such change.
That brings me to a perspective on what kind of structural changes we are looking at in the supply chain because of this. Because one is triggered by COVID, other is, as you said, that's happening over a period of time also. But what kind of structural changes are looking at the supply chain because of all these things happening, and what can be the drivers of the change?
Let's take a simple thing like a crane manufacturer who manufactures cranes for ports. Or a crane manufacturer who is manufacturing cranes for using in infrastructure projects. If over a period of time my focus moves from manufacturing technology and production technology to fleet management of the products that I have manufactured in the past and I continue to manufacture, then my organizational priorities will change from making as many equipment to running as many equipment. It's a little bit like Olification or Uberization of automobile business. Rather than manufacturing thousands of tractors in a year, I would possibly be willing to look at maintaining hundreds of thousands of tractors that I have supplied over a period of time, improving utilization of it, making sure that the users of it are able to get maximum value out of it. My business processes will change, my organization priorities will change, and hence my expectation from my supply chain will change. And I think this is something which one needs to dwell deep into when one looks at industries that you are servicing. If I am a supplier for a company which is moving fast towards servitization of their value chain, then I would look at how do I transform my business to become useful to this company in its future business model, rather than being useful based on my past experience. That's the way I would look at today's opportunity.
Sanjay, when it comes to your industry of jewelry, you have brought in a lot of what you call innovation in the industry. You are maybe the only or the first corporate kind of a structure for jewelry. So in that context, what kind of changes you are expecting in supply chain side, structural changes? Sanjay, you are there?
Hello?
Yeah.
You can hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, see, I actually look this is very positively as a long term. I look that this is once again Tanish from Tata, and maybe as a responsible player, surely we will be more sought after. Then the second thing, I see our supply chain, unlike other supply chain, which is moving via China, getting into China, coming back, and not into that actually. I find we are in a really sweet spot in terms of the gold today. We do not have to get into so much import of gold. Country has got enough quantity of gold, and if we can just do something to recirculate that gold. On the other side, diamond, if you take 9 out of 10 diamonds get processed in the country, and so we have that opportunity. So we don't are not depending on other. Then we have many lakhs of artisans available who have that skill, and more importantly, whatever we produce in the country, 90% is getting consumed in the country. So we are into such a type of situation. I will say it is completely, call it Atmanirbhar type of supply chain is what we see. Very, everything, we don't have to get into China, this problem, that problem. It can be very well sorted out. And so this looks one positive aspect. Other side I am looking is that the way now we are going, and since we as a Tanish being connected on the ground and what exactly is happening, we are also in the process of continuously learning what is that change we can bring, and what is the way other industries working, and what is that change we can bring. And we see there is a big opportunity, and whole this supply chain can be really restructured, and we can make it more future ready. That is another possibility we see in a big way. And surely the market being there, and if you bring the changes and bring new technologies, bring this entire digital aspect into our even the sales, which can be more video selling it gets into, and then you bring all these digital dashboards. You also see that a lot of time we are just seeing why people prefer to come to the showroom, because they want to wear that jewelry. But tomorrow digital can very easily take care of that mirror test, and you can do this wearing from the remote. In fact, we can get into the zone we feel jewelry per se, whatever we produce today, it gets produced across the country. And more jewelry, I will say it is handmade. But what we need mass customization at the consumer end, because all the people look for variety in jewelry. No, you can't produce the same type of car and same type of jewelry. But at the base, if you see, there can be a very good amount of standardization. Because finally everything is made out of certain motifs, or what we call it as a semantic unit, and everything is based on that. So there is a great opportunity sitting to actually completely remodify or revolutionize this supply chain is what I get a perspective. Only we need to look and see this as a challenge. When you are showing your supply chain as a challenge, I was thinking, do we have to think this as a challenge or opportunity? The way we look, it depends on that. So that is what is my perspective, and I see it very positively. And surely we can take care of the people, because we also seen in our supply chain, always it is not because of this situation. Earlier also, is artisan's son want to become artisan? It is like same, is farmer's son want to become farmer? So answer is really no, because you don't find it attractive. You don't find there's no much respect for that tradition, whatever they do. But we find there is a certain skill. So can we just associate with this 20% of the people who are really a value added and who are doing great thing, and with their association bringing technology, actually we can improve productivity many times. Like you see, the way jewelry is getting produced, it is like we give us a piece of steel and we produce a car. It goes like that. But you see that whatever that automation has happened in other industries, be it automobile, electronics, everything is becoming like a very high speed manufacturing. And more importantly, we want to keep this human touch, because we also believe that handcraft has its value. And that handcraft, actually that touch is required. But it doesn't mean that the wire need to be pulled by hand only. So that is what we want to differentiate. That fine touch is brought by the hand, and which actually add the value, and we market that. In fact, one more point I want to tell you, the statistics tell that 70% of the people in India buy gold jewelry. 70%. They may be depending on their capacity. But when it comes to diamond, only 5% of the people buy diamond jewelry. Then we also see this as a big opportunity. How to see that Tanishq wedding band, or that Tanish studded wedding band is there on every finger. So it is actually, I feel the way we look is what you are going to see the situation. Only we should allow this storm to pass, take all your people into confidence. Finally, people is the foundation of any industry, and then we should move on very confidently. That's the way I look, particularly for this industry. I agree with other industry-wide challenges will be different, but particularly for our type of industry, that's my take.
Okay, Veeraraghavan, you wish that you should also have some precious metal in your portfolio. You do have. Platinum, palladium, and rhodium in your auto catalytic converters.
We do have unfortunately a lot of them now with BS6, and they're all becoming very expensive.
Yes.
Now, so I think in terms of the supply chain, to be honest, previously the holy grail in automotive sector was really around scale. So how do you achieve scale at a site, and how do you ensure that you have the most efficient production possible and the most lowest cost possible? And that's probably something that will now change as people look at what is the risk associated with getting everything out of one site globally and so on. And so we need to start looking at how do I diversify the risk. And to be honest, whenever we have done all these supply risk scenarios, both at Ford and in Mahindra, I don't remember at any point us discussing a pandemic which has come up. So that's probably now a new scenario that we need to start looking at to say, how do we handle in case of a pandemic? So I do see that diversification of the supply base will be a major criteria of this. The other thing I see is in terms of how suppliers put in capacities. And I think going forward, as they put in these capacities, they're going to be very conscious of some of the challenges we had now. So I do expect to see, first of all, a lot more, flexibility in the capacity they put in, where they can meet multiple customers, make multiple products. I don't think they're going to be putting in capacities for a single part for a single customer. I think those days are over. People are going to be, that's also part of how they reduce their risk, right? And I also think there will be a lot more consumption of digital services in the supply chain, a lot more automation coming into the supply chain as you figure out some of these challenges with having people in close contact. And I fear the answer for that is going to be to put in place more automation, which from a perspective from a country like India, which has got a lot of surplus labor, is probably not the right answer, or maybe the wrong answer, unless we can redeploy all those people elsewhere. But I fear very much that that's what's going to happen going forward.
So that Veeraraghavan, that brings to the question that with the demand side coming down, and which we are not sure about whether it's going to be reviving also. The point what you made about creating flexibility in my capacity creation becomes a key. So that gives me to the last angle of what we want to discuss. The technology, something like a 3D printing, something like a digital transformation, digitalization and digitization, these things will have a bigger role to play. One thing which comes to your mind. Second is most of the disruptive technologies comes in small chunks. So capacity creation as a second mover becomes an advantage also in this kind of digitalization, in the case of what you call new disruptive technologies. So the structural changes, what you talk about in terms of I need to have flexibility in my supply chain, how well the digital transformation can help in this, or technologies like 3D printing or additive manufacturing can help in this. Okay.
Yeah. I think if I take 3D printing for an example, it works great for making prototypes. Not so good for mass production because it's just simply too expensive. So clearly, and that technology is evolving. It'll continue to evolve. Maybe it will get to a point where it actually becomes cheaper to produce through 3D printing than through mass production. But I don't know that will necessarily make sense. Maybe it will make sense for Sanjay and on his this thing where it's more customized. But in mass production, I'm not so sure how well that will work out. But at the end of the day, there's no question. There'll be lots of technologies coming out that people will start looking at. There's no question it's going to change. It's just we're not quite sure in what form it will be, how it will happen. But for sure, all the issues we're seeing with the pandemic here, that will cause a lot of rethinking across all sectors.
Okay. Sanjay, what is your take on that? Because you're already into 3D printing in a way.
Yeah. See, my take is like this. Surely technology will support for our business and we need to bring in that. Like 10, 12 years back, there was no this process of CAD or CAM into our jewelry process. But now it has come and people are following it. Otherwise, there was an alternate process. So I look from this angle, being a precious supply chain, if there is something which customer sitting at home can design, and it can just go to the machine and there is a gold powder and the diamonds on the other side and the product gets made, there is nothing like that. Actually, we can look from that angle, and we also seen technology doesn't overnight actually produces everything, but we can use it. Maybe the 20% of the product may get made through this route, and so surely I get this view, we'll have to get in technology, because what we are seeing being on the ground, at least for our industry, we see there is a big scope to improve the productivity. There is a big scope to improve the earning of the people. It is big scope to reduce whatever which consumer is paying to make that product. So such possibility we are seeing on the ground, and we should leverage that, because this industry is not like, it is not like automobile, electronic or pharma industry, which is it has reached to its the highest level of automation, but we are just, I will say, we are at the beginning of the automation, so we have that advantage. So making use of that is what I see, and so make use of this technology to improve productivity on other side, and whatever we get technology can be actually incorporated into our production and make things, so whatever is the consumer's future demand is going to be, we can get ready for that. And being a precise supply chain, we need to reduce the length of the supply chain. We need to see that our supply chain is actually closer to the customer, and we have to move in that direction. So it is, I think, once again, I get this view. How do you see this? With what perspective you see? And accordingly, you can bring the changes, because you also see challenge, but you see many opportunities. So why not we look into that and then move on? So technology, I am saying that it is going to be useful further. We can see lot, like I can tell you in the diamond industry, lot can be done by hand, but today if you go and visit at Surat and the entire Bhavnagar, Navsari, you will find for small diamond, like for example, the small diamond, a certain portion has moved to the machine. Actually, it has made life easy. The human is unnecessarily, you are making him to slog and doing something repetitive work, whereas you can use his power for something better or more creative. So somewhere that is what I think the power of technology I see. It is not that, country has to create employment, so you have to keep on repeating. But the human potential, see, beyond any point, human potential is much powerful than the robotics or whatever. It's artificial intelligence end of the day. So how can you use, like the same case, railway, automation, other thing, people were all concerned about what will happen, but nothing happens. In fact, they are becoming more and more powerful. So that is what I think we can also see in our industry.
Okay. Sanjay, I have Suhas, I have a very more specific question for you. See, with people getting into remote working and social distancing, how this digital transformation can get speed up the supply chain processes across supply chain?
So I think I kind of completely agree with what the other two fellow panelists said. Automation, efficiency, reliability, all of this has been drivers to the technology related intervention which has happened so far. The one thing which has probably not happened very extensively is the last point that Sanjay said, and that is, how does data play an important role in making sure that repetitive tasks, decision making which is routine and rudimentary decision making, is happening not based on intervention by people, but it is data based. I would say this is one area where all of us will have to do a lot of work in accelerated manner to make sure that each one of our businesses become data driven businesses. That's one point that I would make. The second point that I would make is in a way linked to, how do I offer choices to my customer to get what he wants, rather than palming off something which is my standard solution. You come far away from every car is customized to you as long as it is black, to providing seat colors differently, to providing variety of accessories differently. But how do I empower my customer to actually provide to him what he really wants, rather than what is easy for me to make, is going to be another. I think a lot of what Sanjay said is happening in his industry may start happening in other sectors too. Now these two end results, if you want, you will have to look at how do you redesign your entire value proposition to the customer, using stronger digital tools, whether it is your sales enablement process, whether it is your operations process, whether it is your supply chain process. How do you use digitalization more effectively for the purpose of harnessing capture of data, making sure that that data is able to drive better decisions? And I think that's where, in my opinion, opportunity lies right now.
Okay. So let me conclude the whole thing with the final question to all three of you. I'll start with Suhas, in fact. See, there seems to be a thrust of self-reliance across countries. In fact, the Shenzhen countries have announced closing of borders and restrictions in movement of people and goods also already. And it's likely to stay that way quite some time. So what kind of impact do you find in supply chain in this context, with a kind of self-reliance being thrust upon by different countries? Yes, Suhas.
I think self-reliance, am I audible, Hari?
Yeah, you are.
Wonderful. Self-reliance probably needs to be looked at by us as an opportunity. I would call it self-reliance market. If America wants to become self-reliant as far as pharmaceutical and healthcare is concerned, they would create a lot of capacity in their country. If India wants to become self-reliant with respect to certain part of supply chain, India will create a lot of opportunity in India as a country. I think we need to look at every geography and say what type of new opportunities are emerging as each one of these geographies becomes self-reliant in some fashion, and look at self-reliancy market as an opportunity right now. That would be one of the strong strategic initiatives that I would take for my organization. The second and extremely important opportunity that we need to capture is looking at core strengths that India has. Several years back, I had an opportunity to meet one of the members of Planning Commission, and we were talking with respect to India vis-a-vis China. And he said something which has stayed in my mind forever. He said, there is no point in we trying to copy what has made China successful. What has made China successful is mass manufacturing, scale of manufacturing. While India has very cleverly deployed customized solution, project engineering, skill-based manufacturing, engineering-driven manufacturing as a differentiated feature. Now, is that something which we can encapsulate, package, and market to the world? As the world is creating self-reliancy, I would take that as the second opportunity. And the third thing that I would do is, I would say, how do I make sure that Indian companies and their suppliers have an ability to become suppliers to the world? That would require ability to create quality, ability to create trust and dependency. And ability to create quality, trust and dependency in whatever we deliver is going to be a huge investment. Whether it is your supply chain, whether it is your own manufacturing, that's going to be a huge investment. So I would make investment in making sure that quality, reliability and dependency and trust that I can create out of what I deliver is the strongest. I would work on these three things for the purpose of, from a point of view of taking care of opportunities. And I think these are opportunities which will come out of the COVID situation. And let's call it the self-reliance market. And let's, as a country, go after this self-reliance market.
Sanjay, you are from a different industry where India, in a way, is a market leader in terms of this business itself. What is your take on that?
See, my take is I just want to give some example which I came to know yesterday. We also on the other side sell watches. And in one of the watch brand, multi-brand outlet, yesterday, one of the customer actually picked up one Casio watch. And he just saw on back of that written made in China. So he just immediately wants to move from there and see that, no, I want to buy a Titan watch made in India. So you're also seeing something on the ground, what people are also looking, and it may also catch up. So I see that is on one aspect, what change finding in the consumer's mind. This is one example. But the other side I see, we as a Tanishq from Tata, and once again torch bearer of this industry, or the whatever, we have that leadership position. So I am seeing we need to see we create a self-reliance on the supply side as well as on the demand side. Something is what one need to look. And self-reliance on the supply side, I just told, we have these 9 out of 10 diamonds getting processed in this country. We have enough stock of gold which can take care of next 50 years demand also. So if you see, and then we have enough artisans available. And then you have your Indian consumer wedding and the type of jewellery. And many people are saying Indian consumer will not so easily go away from jewellery. And that is what, and we only work on this side, how we can make this penetration into diamond. Other side, at young early stage, how can we penetrate customer into this field? So that way, if you see, I think self-reliance is surely going to, and then we can create this self-reliance on the demand side also, being into that industry. So we can actually take this industry to a much next level, and more importantly, I will look, we can come out, actually there's a big scope to produce new varieties of things, much more lighter, better, with a rising gold rate, and come out with maybe the diamond, other thing which Indian consumer says diamond is not for me. So how to make that also affordable for them, and that is what I think we see as an opportunity. And I think that is what I look at very positively. The self-reliance, and we are already there, and we can take it to the next level.
Thank you so much, Sanjay. Thank you so much. In fact, if I do a conclusion of this session, it's a disservice, I would say. Rather, I will quickly talk about a little bit of key points only here. Only one line I am going to say. The answer given by all the three of you is absolutely contextual in the context of the businesses you are coming from. So therefore, when I have to take out something from here, it is very important for me to look at the context of my business to understand that. There are a few questions. Maybe we have another 10 minutes for that to conclude the questions. A few questions I'll just post to the panelists. The first question, I will take 3 questions together here, which is primarily a question by Krishnamurthy. And the 3 questions, one for Sanjay, one for Veeraraghavan, and one for Suhas. The question, lavish wedding may be a thing of past. So what is your take on this? It's a question, quickly.
See, we agree that it may be our mindset, because always we say, is the recession in the mind or it is in the market? So it depends. Now, maybe the people may spend even more, they may spend less. It is fine. But what is happening? India is growing. There are 1 crore plus marriages are happening. Today, I look at this way, we may be taking care of 5% of the market share. There is a big headroom available in front of us. So we don't have to worry from that angle. And finally, end of the day, what we are seeing, we should get ready for what consumer want. Tomorrow, suppose instead of 22 carat jewelry, if it makes sense to make 18 carat or 14 carat, and if customer is okay with, because we see customer is not buying by gold rate and what is he goes by his price point. He goes by his budget. And I think we have to support that. There is a huge customer base available. And so not to really get worried by that. Yes.
Yeah. And Krishnamurthy's question to Veeraraghavan is, work from home will definitely impact the car demand, and which seems to be staying here. Yes, Veeraraghavan?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm having some internet difficulties. So the question was, how does work from home affect the car demand?
It seems to be going to have an impact on the car manufacturing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, these are some of the long-term things that we can't predict. Honestly, there are 2 thoughts about it. One is, it just says, yeah, if I can work from home, why do I need a car? But then, not everyone buys a car because they want to commute to work. In fact, quite often till now, people used to use taxis to commute to work. At least that was the trend. And now they may not be willing to do that. The car is typically used more for recreational purposes and so on. So, for sure there will be some impact. How much it is it going to make a big difference, or is it a minor difference? Honestly, I don't think we know at this point of time.
Okay. And his question to Suhas, I am going to skip, not because of the question is not important. I got a more interesting question I want to pose to Suhas from Krishnamurthy again. What is the HR potential of the returned expat labor? Because there's going to be a huge amount of expat labor going to come back. What is the potential of that here?
I think rather than looking at HR potential of expat labor, I would look at it as potential to create new type of jobs and work. In many segments of the job, other than IT industry, somewhere down the line, people who are selling their services on a part-time basis hasn't been a way of engaging people. Many IT companies engage programmers, based on the amount of work that they do, rather than just engaging a fleet of programmers as employees. I would say, the incoming talent that we are getting, we should start looking at using that talent more creatively and creating different type of roles and jobs rather than engaging them as full-time employees.
Okay. Two more questions I'll take. One is coming from Balasubramanian, which is primarily, I think he's definitely having a challenge here. What should be your strategy when you have more or less monopoly suppliers? For example, Reliance Industries in our case. Yeah, anyone can take this question.
I would say
please.
develop another supplier. Develop another supplier, and till the time you're able to do that, maintain good relationship with the supplier.
So what's your take, Suhas, on that?
Yeah, I think this question has got nothing to do with COVID.
Nothing to do with COVID. Nothing to do with COVID.
This is a generic question, and I think the most monopoly suppliers tend up. Can you hear me?
Subhasish, please keep your audio muted, please.
Okay. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, so most monopoly suppliers end up becoming monopoly on account of their access to capital and their access to cheap capital. This has been the situation with a lot of companies when it comes to natural resources based industries or natural resources driven industries. You've also seen that coming into telecom. You've also seen that coming into variety of other sectors where investments is very high. So I do not know whether it is going to be easy for you to go away from monopoly suppliers, in these strong capital investment driven sectors. We'll have to learn to live with them and to grow together in a manner whereby we become an important part of their business.
Okay. One final question which I'll take from Vinay Bamalwa.
Just, Hariharan, can I just add one point to that?
Please, Sanjay.
Yeah. What I was thinking, I think it's not so much about monopoly suppliers will be there. Like for us also, there are some suppliers where our dependency is high. And we are actually seeing we can actually collaborate with these people. Surely we can look for alternate. In some of these jewellery industries, jewellery side, I will say, some of the suppliers, even we can think actually how to partner with them, invest into their setup. Even we can think about actually even taking over such supplier. Even that all can be thought about, not to really get lost by that, what to do. And monopoly is the way, and there's no solution now. You are hitting the wall. I don't think so. Yeah.
Yeah, Vinay's question. According to some experts, China is the master of assembling parts actually manufactured in other Eastern countries. India cannot copy-paste this 40-year expertise overnight. Veeraraghavan, any view on that?
No, and I think that's a fair comment. There are a lot of advantages that China has that they've built up over time, and just trying to blindly copy that and try to take them head on, that to me does not make sense. I think India has a different set of strengths, and that's what you need to be focusing on, not necessarily competing head-on with the Chinese. To me, that's not a great strategy, because they have a lot of advantage. You're not going to be able to overcome those hurdles easily. So you need to look at how is the demand evolving over as everyone comes out of post-COVID, and what are the demands that you can meet with your own capabilities. So you need to make your own assessment of your own strengths and say, what are the types of demand that I can meet with what I have. That's probably more profitable than trying to compete with the Chinese.
In fact, Suhas was talking about something in the similar lines earlier also, correct, Suhas?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think, I completely agree with what Veeraraghavan said. Not only is it not required, I think it would be counterproductive, because you would end up creating competition for displacing a country or displacing a company from its favored position. I think we need to look at it from a point of view of what are our strengths, and we need to look at it from a point of view of what are emerging customers' requirements, and focus on being better at meeting those requirements as compared to anybody else. I think, you being hugely competition focused from a point of view of creating our own strength is never a good idea. Because you have your own unique strengths and you need to work on that.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we have come to the end of the discussion.
Sorry.
Sorry.
My point is like this.
I'm sorry.
No problem. I just heard, let us say 4 or 5 years back, I was having a word with this MD of Thermax, and he was telling me at that time, not today, that maybe we are just talking robotics here. There in people in thousands, not in thousand, in 10,000s are getting trained on robotics, AI, ML in China. But that is fine. I'm saying it's no problem. We know we may not be there even today. But what we see, the way we are going about, the way human manpower, what we have today, and we also need to keep engage them. So it is not that human potential itself, somewhere we should not forget that under the name of automation. What we see, we need to do automation up to certain part. Like in case of, if I take as a diamond industry, up to certain part which is repetitive to nature, or which is, let us say, in automobile, where you do a lot of welding and such job. We agree that why humans should do that and why we should put him into trouble. But there's a lot part which human also can do and use his intelligence. So somewhere I think we have to strike that balance. We don't have to exactly copy China. And when robotics come, even our people also can do that. It is not a problem. Once you start focusing, you will do it.
Thank you so
like
much.
How Prime Minister 2 days back just said, when we gone into this situation, we are not producing even one N95 mask or no PPE was getting produced. But today 2 lakh kits are getting produced per day. I think the necessity is what will make us to do that.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. Thank you so much.
This question is valid. I agree with it. That. Yes.
Thank you so much for all 3 of you. And I have an advantage of being a moderator. I can choose to summarize or not summarize. I choose not to summarize because it's a phenomenal discussion. But let me leave only one statement I'll make in the end, and then we'll conclude this particular panel discussion. See, it is contextual. Whether my supply chain is going to be change or not change is contextual. But there is something underlying which I think we need to look at, which is one of the biggest challenge in responsive supply chain is primarily the way we create capacities. So when I look at capacity creation, the biggest dilemma for any organization is creation of capacity. Ultimately, when you talk about supply chain capacity creation, or whether when you talk about creation of capacity internally. If you look at Tanish's supply chain, it has some great lessons for other industries as well. Now, let us not be looking at it only because it is applicable in the context of jewelry. The biggest advantage they have is a kind of smaller capacity creations, modular capacity creations. The same thing is what we have done in theorization in the case of automobile also. The same thing is what is done in the case of 3PL. I'm talking about logistics. The same thing is happening in the context of what you call creating IT capacity through cloud computing. So capacity creation, if we can address the capacity creation as a dilemma, supply chain, most of the problems can be addressed quite effectively. I think we'll conclude this discussion. Thank you so much for all this thing. In fact, we are getting feedback from people that about the kind of thing. In fact, Sanjay, there is one specific feedback somebody has given to you. You should get into marketing.
So I was more coming from that. Surely, always we should do challenges opportunity.
No, I'm giving you positive feedback. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I take it.
Actually,
yeah.
Thank you so much, Veeraraghavan. In fact, the kind of dimensions all 3 of you brought in was something amazing. Thank you so much for being there. It's a great learning for all of us. And let us look forward to something powerful like this. This is an advantage of a powerful panel like this. Nothing can be. Thank you so much, Suhas. Thank you so much, Sanjay. Thank you so much, Veera.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed myself. Thank you.
Thank you. Real pleasure being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.